Have you ever felt like something about life just doesn't add up? Like you're playing a game with rules you never agreed to? You wake up, go through the motions, try to fit in, but deep down, there's a whisper, a silence that screams, a strange, unshakable sense that you're disconnected from something essential, from yourself, from the universe, from a truth no one talks about. Baruch Spinoza saw through that illusion centuries ago, and what he discovered could change everything you think you know about reality, love, fear, freedom, and who you truly are. This isn't about religion, this isn't about rebellion. It's about spirituality, raw, lucid, and mystical. It's about waking up from the collective trance and finally seeing the architecture of your suffering. Why you keep repeating patterns, why you feel empty even when you succeed, why peace seems so far away, and how all of this can start to dissolve the moment you choose to see. In this video, you're not just going to learn about Spinoza. You're going to enter a deeper field of understanding, where ancient wisdom, modern psychology, and sacred symbols converge. You'll see how the universe speaks through cause and effect, not miracles, how real love is born from wholeness, not need, and how freedom, clarity, and harmony are not abstract ideas, but states of being you can reclaim. This might be the most important message your soul needed to hear right now. And if you're still here, that's not an accident. You were meant to find this, to remember, to reconnect. But before a single word is said, do this. Subscribe to Celestial Truths. Many of you watch, but aren't yet part of this community, and what we explore goes far beyond surface content. It's a journey, a path, a return to the center. So stay with me until the end, because what you're about to uncover might just be the truth your spirit has been waiting lifetimes to hear. There comes a moment in every seeker's life when the veil begins to tear, not through violence but through the silent insistence of truth. It doesn't knock loudly, it whispers, unsettling everything built on illusion. Baruch Spinoza was one of those rare souls who refused to accept the world as it was handed to him. He saw through the fabric of control, the tangled net of religious dogmas and collective delusions. Instead of clinging to what was comfortable, he stepped into the unknown, guided only by reason, inner silence, and a deep trust in the mystical order of the universe. This wasn't rebellion for the sake of it. It was the soul remembering its own voice. To live outside the accepted story is no small thing. Society punishes the ones who don't play by the rules it never openly explains. Spinoza knew that. He was excommunicated, alienated, dismissed, yet he chose exile over betrayal of his own spirituality. Why? Because to him, truth was sacred, not truth dressed in robes and rituals, but truth as it is, raw, expansive, beyond the mask of human institutions. Like an alchemist of consciousness, he burned away the impurities of inherited beliefs to distill the essence of what is real. In doing so, he illuminated a path for those who feel the weight of collective hypnosis pressing on their chest. The fear of being different, of stepping away from tradition, often silences the awakening. But Spinoza invites us to ask, what if the rules you're following were never meant for your spirit? What if the very institutions that claim to protect your soul are the ones binding it? He challenges us to see that many of our beliefs are not our own, but borrowed, programmed into us since childhood. And once you begin to see through them, the universe starts to speak a different language, a mystical one. It speaks in synchronicities, sudden clarity, and moments of deep inner knowing. But first, you must dare to listen. In the spiritual journey, truth is not always comfortable, but it is liberating. Spinoza teaches that clarity is not granted by external validation, but by inner coherence. When your mind, heart, and actions align with what feels deeply true, no dogma can dominate you. This doesn't mean living in opposition to others. It means living in harmony with the deeper order that breathes through all things. Through contemplation, dream work, and reflective writing, one begins to sense this hidden current. It isn't loud, but it's unshakable. Like the stars silently wheeling across the sky, this truth reveals itself in patterns if you're awake enough to see. And so the seeker walks, not away from the world, but through it with new eyes. The illusions still dance, but now they're seen for what they are, shadows on the wall of the cave. The real light comes from within, and it points to a greater reality that Spinoza dared to name. A reality where spirituality is not confined to doctrine, but infused in everything, where the mystical and the rational are not enemies, but reflections of the same truth. And just as the seeker begins to understand this, a new question emerges, not about what is false, but about what is real beneath the next layer. Let's move toward that layer now. When Spinoza said that God and nature are one and the same, he wasn't offering a metaphor. He was unveiling a mystical truth that turns everything upside down, or rather, right side up. In this view, the universe is not a stage built by a distant creator. It is the creator itself, in motion, in form, in silence and eruption. Every leaf, every breath, every moment of decay or birth, it all pulses with divinity. Spirituality, then, is not found in escaping the world, but in embracing it fully, reverently. This isn't pantheism as mere poetry. It's a radical reorientation of the soul toward the immediacy of what is. Spinoza invites us to see, God is not watching, God is being. This changes everything. The idea of a punishing, whimsical God falls away like old skin. There are no miracles that break the laws of reality, because all of reality is the miracle. What we call divine punishment is simply misunderstanding cause and effect. When a tree falls in the forest, it isn't angry. When lightning strikes, it isn't judging. Spinoza's wisdom pierces through fear-based control and shows us a universe that is ordered, vast and interconnected. To awaken is to realize you are not separate from that order. The river flowing, the planet spinning, your thoughts, your breath, all follow the same eternal logic. That is the mystical structure of existence. This realization doesn't make life easier. It makes it clearer. It removes the false comfort of blaming some external power for our misfortunes. And in that raw clarity, something unexpected appears: peace. There's a certain serenity that arises when you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "How did this come to be?" That shift alone dissolves suffering at its roots. In the mystical journey of individuation, this is a sacred turning point. Instead of resisting the currents of life, you begin to flow with them, not as a passive leaf, but as a conscious ripple in the divine sea of causality. This is spirituality with depth, stripped of superstition and grounded in cosmic law. To live by this awareness is to live responsibly. If every action ripples through the fabric of the universe, then your choices matter immensely, not because someone is watching, but because everything is watching, through you. This is not pressure. It's empowerment. It means you are part of the unfolding. The sunrise doesn't seek approval, it simply rises. The seed doesn't worry if it will bloom, it just follows the pattern. Spinoza shows us that wisdom lies in recognizing that we are also patterns, not chaotic but complex, sacred and necessary. When you meditate on your day, track synchronicities or reflect on recurring dreams, you're decoding the language of that divine nature. And here's the paradox: in accepting the absence of divine intervention, you find divine presence everywhere. A broken cup, a quiet snowfall, a sudden insight. They all whisper of the same truth. You don't need permission to be whole. You don't need to be forgiven to belong. The mystical path Spinoza outlines is not about earning salvation, but about remembering connection. As this awareness deepens, the noise of fear and superstition dissolves. What remains is something ancient, spacious, and alive. And just as this harmony begins to settle in, your bones, a deeper question rises from the silence. If everything is part of nature, then how do we find peace within it? Let us walk into that next mystery. There's a hidden war that most souls fight daily, not with others, but with reality itself. A quiet, internal resistance that whispers, "This shouldn't be happening." Yet, as Spinoza reveals, the universe doesn't bend to our desires or frustrations. It moves by its own rhythm, ancient, precise, impersonal, yet profoundly mystical. The suffering, then, isn't in the event itself, but in our refusal to see it clearly. The question isn't, "Why did this happen to me?" but "How does this fit into the unfolding of everything?" This shift, from victim to observer, from reaction to reflection, is the gateway to a deeper spirituality, one that honors the dance of causes and effects shaping all things. In a world intoxicated by control, This truth feels like both a liberation and a loss. People are taught to chase outcomes, resist discomfort, and declare war on what is. But Spinoza urges something radically different: surrender, not as weakness, but as wisdom. Accepting reality doesn't mean resignation. It means seeing clearly, without distortion. It's standing still in the storm and noticing its pattern. Through that awareness, you begin to realign with the universe instead of fighting it. A failed relationship, an unexpected illness, a lost opportunity. These are not punishments. They're parts of a web so vast we can't always see its shape. But through meditation, dream journaling, or mindful breathwork, we begin to sense the intelligence behind the chaos. This is where real peace is born, not from avoidance, but from inclusion. When you stop denying what's happening and start participating in it consciously, something softens. The internal noise fades, and in its place, clarity arises. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the repressed, unloved aspects of the self. Often, resistance to reality is resistance to our own shadow materializing through life events. Spinoza's teachings echo this. By understanding how things came to be, we reintegrate what we tried to exile from our perception. In mystical terms, life is always mirroring the soul's condition. The more you resist the mirror, the more distorted the image becomes. But when you breathe, observe, and accept, the image becomes a map. Imagine a tree bending in the wind. It doesn't ask why the wind came. It simply moves with it. That's not passivity. It's deep intelligence. In the same way, those who learn to bend with the conditions of their lives aren't weaker, they're wiser. Spinoza invites us to become like that tree, to stop declaring war on what already is, and instead ask, what is this moment trying to teach me? Through spirituality, we're reminded that the universe doesn't send pain as a curse, but as a signal, a chance to wake up. Those moments of deep silence, after loss, after failure, after collapse, are invitations to a greater alignment with the laws that govern both nature and soul. And so, the seeker finds peace, not by forcing life to match desire, but by allowing desire to be shaped by truth. This isn't a one-time revelation, but a practice. Every time you breathe through discomfort instead of pushing it away, you're realigning. Every time you observe your emotions without judging them, you're opening space for wisdom to arise. And as you walk this path, you begin to feel less like a victim of life and more like a participant in a cosmic unfolding. But peace, as profound as it is not the end. It's a foundation. Because once you stop resisting reality, the next mystery calls, what then is true happiness? In a world obsessed with having more, being more, proving more, the soul quietly suffocates. Most people chase an idea of happiness that isn't theirs. It's borrowed, implanted by social conditioning, fueled by comparison, and sustained by fantasy. But Spinoza, with the calm of a mystic and the precision of a philosopher, offers a revelation that cuts through this fog. True happiness isn't about possessing, it's about perceiving. Not illusion, but clarity. Not escapism, but awareness. Spirituality, in its deepest sense, isn't a detour from life. It's seeing life as it truly is. And when one sees clearly, even the smallest moment becomes enough. Even silence becomes song. Consider this. How many times have you achieved what you wanted, only to feel empty again? That's the tragedy of illusion. It promises fullness, delivers fleetingness. Spinoza teaches that happiness grounded in desires disconnected from reality will always end in suffering. The mind becomes a slave to projections, chasing shadows that dissolve upon contact. But when the mind aligns with the universe, not through wishful thinking, but through understanding, a new kind of peace emerges. It's not loud, it doesn't need applause. It's the quiet joy of coherence, like a lake, reflecting the sky. A mind at peace with truth becomes still, and in that stillness it touches eternity. Carl Jung warned of the danger of mistaking symbols for substance. To project happiness onto status, wealth, or external validation is to hand your soul to illusions. But clarity, the kind Spinoza speaks of, begins in the body, in presence. It's felt when you observe a sunset without needing to photograph it. It's sensed when you recognize a pattern in your suffering and choose differently. This mystical process of awakening isn't dramatic and it's subtle. You start noticing synchronicities. Your dreams begin to speak louder, and slowly, your happiness becomes less about what happens and more about how you see. That shift is liberation, not from the world but into it. And yet this clarity must be cultivated. Just as a garden doesn't bloom overnight, the mind doesn't uncloud itself without care. Reflective writing, symbolic meditation, and conscious solitude are tools that strip away false desires. Through them, the seeker learns to ask, do I want this because it's real, or because I was told to want it? Spinoza doesn't promise quick relief. He offers profound reorientation. To find happiness in understanding rather than acquisition is to step off the wheel of craving. It's to root your being in what cannot be taken. That is the beginning of freedom, the kind that no storm can shake. So, what happens when the illusions fall away? What remains when the noise quiets? You, whole, present, connected to the living fabric of the universe, are no longer seduced by promises that fragment your soul. Clarity is a return, not to naivety, but to essence, a remembering of who you are beneath the layers. And as this clarity deepens, happiness is no longer something to find, it becomes who you are becoming. Yet even clarity has another layer, another doorway, because once the seeker begins to see, a new question arises. What, then, is freedom? There's a common illusion that shackles more souls than chains ever could, the belief that freedom means doing whatever you want, whenever you want. But Spinoza, walking the fine thread between reason and spirituality, offers a deeper truth. Most people who believe they are free are in fact imprisoned, not by walls but by impulses, not by others but by themselves. Desire, when unexamined, becomes a puppeteer, and the self, unaware, dances. True freedom, Spinoza says, begins the moment you understand why you want what you want. It's not about indulgence, it's about insight. Not chaos, but clarity. Look around. How many choices are truly your own? The products you buy, the goals you chase, the love you long for. How much of that comes from your essence, and how much from programming? The universe speaks in symbols and signs, yet we often ignore them, chasing artificial lights instead of inner illumination. Spinoza calls us to pause and examine, to ask, what part of me is making this decision? When that question echoes in your being, you begin to peel back the layers. Jung would call this process individuation, the confrontation with your own unconscious, your shadow, your inherited masks. Freedom isn't running, it's returning. Through this lens, the mystic sees that most suffering comes from choices made in blindness. Acting out of hunger doesn't make you free, it makes you reactive. Acting out of awareness, however, plants the seed of true autonomy. And that seed grows. In silence, in reflection. Practices like dream analysis, journaling desires, or sitting with discomfort are not mere rituals. They're doorways into your inner architecture. Spinoza's path is not about rejecting desire, but about understanding its roots. When you trace a desire to its origin, you reclaim your power from it. That is the sacred turning point from compulsion to consciousness. And in that space, between the impulse and the act, freedom lives. It's a quiet space, often ignored in the noise of modern life, but it's where transformation happens. Freedom, then, is not the removal of limits, it's the realization of what truly moves you. The more you understand yourself, the less you're dragged by forces outside your control. This is where spirituality meets mystical awareness, not in floating above life, but in mastering your navigation within it. The universe, after all, doesn't reward noise. It reveals its wisdom to those who listen. And listening is an act of freedom. So ask yourself, not what you want, but why you want it. Ask not where you're going, but what part of you chose the direction. In this process of inquiry, a strange thing happens. Desires begin to transform. You stop craving what numbs and start seeking what nourishes. You stop escaping and start expanding. That is the quiet birth of a liberated soul. But once you've tasted this deeper freedom, another truth begins to rise. What does it mean to love, then, from a place of wholeness rather than need? Real love doesn't bind, it liberates. In a world where love is so often confused with possession, control, or fear of abandonment, Spinoza's wisdom arrives like a soft thunder in the soul. He teaches that love born from lack is not love. It is longing wearing a mask. True love, the kind that flows from the depths of spirituality, emerges not from need but from fullness. It is the echo of a soul that has remembered its own wholeness, and in that remembering no longer clings. Like the universe itself, true love holds without gripping, gives without demanding, and stays without trapping. Most people enter relationships hoping to be completed, but that very hope is a subtle admission of inner emptiness. Jung would say, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Spinoza echoes this in his own way. Until you understand your motives, your love will always carry shadows. You'll confuse attention with affection, desire with devotion. But the mystical path asks, what if you are already whole? What if the person before you is not your salvation, but your reflection? That shift changes everything. It transforms love into a sacred encounter, not a transaction for emotional survival. In practice, this means returning to yourself before reaching for the other. Through silence, solitude, and symbolic meditation, you begin to witness the source of your affection. Is it rooted in joy or fear? In clarity or projection? Writing down your dreams, noticing synchronicities, sitting in presence, these are not mere acts of stillness. They are acts of love. Love for yourself, the divine essence that mirrors the very structure of the universe. And when you cultivate that love within, what you offer to another becomes a gift, not a bargain. You stop demanding that they fix your wounds. Instead, you walk together, two sovereign paths, intertwining freely. This doesn't mean love becomes cold or detached. On the contrary, it becomes warmer, more luminous. Without the need to control, love becomes a dance, not a chain. Without fear of loss, it becomes expansive rather than constricted. You don't love less, you love more truthfully. Spinoza's love is not an escape from solitude, but an expression of its mastery. It's the kind of love the mystical traditions speak of, where two beings recognize the divine in one another, yet remain rooted in their own being. It is not about becoming one to avoid loneliness, but about becoming two to celebrate union. And so when the seeker finally understands that to love is not to cling, but to witness, a great burden falls away. Love stops being a performance and becomes a presence. It breathes instead of suffocates. It listens instead of demands. And in that space, real intimacy is born, not from dependence, but from alignment. But this realization, powerful as it is, uncovers another layer of illusion still gripping the collective heart. Because, while many suffer for love, even more are ruled by something deeper, more primal, fear. And so we now walk toward that truth. Fear is a silent architect, building prisons without walls, forging chains we can't see, convincing us that they are for our safety. Spinoza, with the clarity of a sage and the vision of a mystic, saw through this architecture. He understood that fear is the most efficient mechanism of control ever devised, not because it hurts, but because it convinces. It tells you to obey not out of understanding, but out of anxiety. It whispers that the universe is hostile, chaotic, unpredictable, unless you follow the rules. But whose rules? That is the question few dare to ask. And in not asking, they surrender their spirituality to the machinery of fear. Governments, religions, and systems of mass consumption know this well. They've mastered the art of cloaking fear as virtue, fear of punishment as morality, fear of scarcity as productivity, fear of rejection as obedience. Spinoza dismantled this illusion with a single tool, understanding. He showed that fear thrives in ignorance, but dissolves in comprehension. Once you begin to understand how the system works, how it feeds on your unconscious responses, the spell breaks. Like awakening from a long sleep, the soul begins to see the puppeteer behind the curtain, and in that moment, the mystical nature of freedom starts to emerge. This isn't just a philosophical idea, it's a lived experience. Start noticing, when do you say yes because you mean it? And when do you say yes to avoid discomfort? That is fear. When you scroll endlessly to avoid your own thoughts, that is fear. When you follow traditions you don't believe in, or remain in relationships that stifle your essence, that is fear disguised as loyalty or normalcy. The path of spirituality invites you to reclaim your mind. Through shadow work, dream interpretation, and deep introspection, you begin to trace fear to its roots, and, in doing so, you start to untangle the programming. Spinoza doesn't offer comfort. He offers clarity. He doesn't soothe you into submission. He awakens you into sovereignty. And in this awakening, you learn that fear isn't the enemy. It's a signal, a message from the unconscious pointing toward a wound, a lie, or a forgotten truth. When you sit with your fears instead of running from them, you transmute them. Fear of death becomes reverence for life. Fear of rejection becomes alignment with authenticity. And fear of the unknown becomes curiosity for the universe's unfolding. This alchemy is where freedom is truly born, not by escaping fear, but by integrating its wisdom. And so, the seeker who dares to look fear in the eye begins to see its shape shifting. What once appeared as a threat now reveals itself as a teacher. The lessons are never easy, but they are sacred, because on the other side of fear lies the forgotten truth, that no one can control a soul that knows itself. But, once this truth is known, a deeper wisdom emerges from the silence, a wisdom that doesn't resist reality but flows with it. And thus, we arrive at the next layer of the journey. What does it mean to live in harmony with nature itself? There's a quiet intelligence in the way the river bends, the way the tree surrenders to the wind without breaking. Nature does not argue with what is, it embodies it. Spinoza, in his mystical precision, saw this as the highest form of wisdom, not resisting the universe, but aligning with its unfolding. In a world obsessed with control, domination, and prediction, this idea feels revolutionary, yet it's ancient, whispered by sages, shamans, and souls, que conhecem o silêncio do cosmos. Real spirituality, Spinoza teaches, isn't about retreating from the world. It's about understanding its rhythm and learning how to move with it. Modern life, with all its noise, has pulled us away from this natural cadence. We rush against time, force outcomes, and curse the seasons of waiting. But the universe doesn't hurry, and yet everything is accomplished. To live in harmony with nature is to embrace this sacred pace, to understand that wisdom isn't in doing more, but in doing what aligns. Just as the moon pulls the tide, your inner world responds to unseen forces. When you honor that, through intuitive listening, symbolic meditation, or simply observing the patterns of your life, you begin to live with reality instead of in opposition to it. This isn't passivity, it's precision. Spinoza shows us that understanding the laws of nature gives you power, not to defy them, but to use them wisely. Like a sailor who reads the wind, the awakened soul learns when to act, when to wait, and when to let go. The mystical path is not a retreat from responsibility, it's the deepest form of it. To walk in sync with the world's design is to become an instrument of it. Through your decisions, your awareness, and your stillness, the universe expresses itself. You are not separate from nature. You are nature in reflective form. When resistance fades, suffering softens. You stop blaming, stop forcing, stop clinging. Instead, you begin to adapt, flow, and trust. This doesn't mean giving up. It means playing a deeper game, one where strategy is born from presence and serenity becomes strength. The mystic understands this. The more aligned you are with reality, the more reality opens its doors to you. Synchronicities increase, dreams become clearer. Even conflict becomes a mirror for growth. These aren't coincidences, they're confirmations, signs that you've stepped into the current rather than fighting against it. And so the seeker begins to live differently, less like a warrior conquering fate, and more like a guardian dancing with it. Wisdom becomes action infused with presence, simplicity becomes sacred, and life, with all its chaos and unpredictability, becomes a teacher rather than a threat. This is the heart of practical spirituality, where insight meets embodiment. And just when the soul starts to feel the peace of this flow, a final invitation arises, not to transcend, but to transform, because to walk in harmony with nature is to be ready for something greater still, to return to the whole conscious and free. Now that you've seen what Spinoza truly revealed, tell me, what part of your reality are you finally ready to stop resisting? What illusion are you willing to let go of so you can return to your essence? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your experience might be the mirror someone else needs to begin their journey. And if this message resonated with your spirituality, if it stirred something ancient and mystical inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, subscribe to Celestial Truths and turn on the notifications so you never miss another moment of expansion. And if you're ready to take the next step, watch the video appearing on your screen now. It goes even deeper, into the connection between shadow, destiny, and the language the universe uses to speak directly to your soul. I'll see you there. With reverence, Celestial Truths.